The whisper was a knife in the quiet of the grand library. "Look what the shadows dragged in." Liam's voice, the same voice that once promised forever, now dripped with contempt. I froze, my hand hovering over a fragile scroll. My worn hood felt paper thin, no defense at all against the sudden piercing attention. His new fiancée, a pristine she-wolf from a pure bloodline, laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Don't get too close, darling. You might catch her taint." Her words were for him, but her eyes, cold and triumphant, were locked on me. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembled packs. Eyes, dozens of them, turned to my corner. They weren't just looking, they were dissecting, judging. The weight of their scorn was a physical force pressing down, threatening to shatter my bones. I was the ghost at the feast, the bad omen everyone had been taught to fear. Liam raised his voice, ensuring everyone at the Blood Moon Conclave could hear. "The Silverwood Pack cast out this anomaly for a reason. Her very presence here is a curse, a shadow that could poison this entire gathering." My breath hitched. Shadow, the name they had branded me with. The word echoed with the memory of my father breaking the family totem at my feet, declaring me unbound, unclean. My heart, a traitor in my chest, hammered with the old, familiar pain of rejection. My fingers, numb and trembling, lost their grip. A priceless scroll tumbled from the table, unspooling across the cold stone floor like a final damning testament to my failure. A collective gasp went through the crowd. There was nowhere to run. I was pinned by their hatred, a specimen of brokenness on display. The library, once my sanctuary, had become my pillory, and all I could do was stand there and endure the slow, agonizing burn of my complete and utter humiliation. The heavy oak doors of the library slammed open, not with a crash, but with a deep, resonant boom that vibrated through the stone floor. Every whisper died, every sneer froze. The air, thick with contempt seconds before, turned sharp and cold, like the first breath of a winter storm. A shadow fell over the entrance, so vast it seemed to swallow the light. He stood there, a king in all but a crown. Garrick. His sheer size was an act of aggression, his presence a suffocating weight that bent the will of everyone in the room. A jagged scar sliced through one eyebrow, a testament to a violence they couldn't comprehend. His amber eyes, ancient and predatory, swept over the cowering alphas, dismissing them as children playing at power. A low growl echoed, not from his throat, but from the very air around him. For a flicker of a second, two spectral wolves, one of shadow and one of smoke, flanked him, their ethereal forms a promise of absolute annihilation. The crowd flinched back, their pack instincts screaming at them to submit. This was not an alpha. This was a primal god of their kind. Then his gaze stopped. It cut through the crowd, past Liam, past the pure-blooded she-wolf, and landed on me, on the broken girl in the corner. For the first time, I felt seen not as a curse, but as a destination. His expression didn't change, but the crushing pressure in the room seemed to focus, creating a pocket of stillness just for me. He smelled the air, a subtle intake of breath, and I knew he had found what he was looking for. Garrick moved. Each step was deliberate, a thunderclap of authority. He didn't walk around Liam. He walked through his space, forcing my former fiancé to stumble back or be trampled. The king stopped inches from him, his shadow engulfing the lesser alpha. He said nothing. He didn't have to. His silent, burning contempt was enough to make Liam physically shrink, his face pale with a fear I had never seen before. Then he turned to me. The ancient predator looked down, and his voice, a low baritone that resonated in my very bones, was not a request. It was a command, a declaration. "You're coming with me." He held out a hand the size of a shield, not waiting for an answer. Before anyone could process what was happening, his fingers closed gently but firmly around my arm, and he pulled me from my pillory, leading me out of the library and into a world I never knew existed. He didn't take me to a dungeon. He led me through halls carved from the mountain's heart, the air smelling of ancient stone and winter. My every instinct screamed that I was a mouse being led into a lion's den. I expected chains, an interrogation cell, a cold floor. I was prepared for pain. I was not prepared for this. He pushed open two massive ironwood doors, and I stopped dead. It wasn't a room. It was a sanctuary. A fire roared in a hearth big enough to stand in, casting a warm, golden light over shelves that climbed to a vaulted ceiling, groaning under the weight of 1,000 books. A bed, piled high with black furs and deep crimson silks, looked impossibly soft. This place was more magnificent than the grand library I had just been shamed in. "These are your chambers." Garrick's voice was a low rumble behind me. My chambers. The words didn't compute. I had a cot in a storage room. I owned one spare tunic. I flinched when he stepped past me, my body tensing for a blow that never came. He was a terrifying storm of power, yet he moved around me as if I were spun glass. He saw me shiver, saw the tremor in my hands that had nothing to do with the cold. Without a word, he turned and left. The brief moment of his absence was a breath I didn't know I was holding. He returned carrying a heavy ceramic bowl. The rich scent of stew and herbs filled the air, a smell of home I hadn't known in years. He placed the bowl on a small table near the fire, then draped a thick fur blanket over the back of the chair. He did it all with a deliberate, unnerving gentleness. He never got too close. He never demanded I look at him. He simply provided warmth and sustenance, then retreated to the far side of the room, giving me space. The gesture was so foreign, so deeply unexpected, that it broke something inside me. I sat, pulling the heavy fur around my shoulders. It smelled like him, cedar and snow and steel. I ate the stew like a starving animal, the warmth chasing the deep, settled chill from my bones. For the first time in 6 years, a single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek. I wasn't being punished. I was being cared for. When I was done, the silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was watchful, protective. Finally, he spoke, his voice pulling me from my thoughts. "They exiled you for what you are," he said, his amber eyes fixed on me. "Fools. They threw away a key they didn't have the sense to recognize." He gestured toward a large stone lectern in the center of the room. On it rested a single massive codex bound in what looked like blackened dragon hide. My seers and scholars have tried for a century to read that book. To them, the pages are blank. Cursed, they say. He took a step closer, and the sheer force of his presence made the air feel thick. They are wrong. The book is not cursed. It is waiting. His gaze was a physical weight, pinning me in place, but there was no malice in it. There was hunger, but it wasn't for my body. It was for something more. "They call you a shadow," he continued, his voice dropping lower, vibrating through the stone floor. "Show me what the shadows see, Alara." He used my name. No one had used my name in years. It was a forgotten sound, and hearing it from him was like a key turning in a lock deep inside my soul. I approached the lectern, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was not testing my worth as a female or a mate. He was testing the very part of me that had caused my exile. He was valuing the thing I had been taught to despise. As my trembling fingers hovered inches from the ancient page, a faint silver script began to glow, weaving itself into existence from nothing. A low growl of pure, possessive satisfaction rumbled from his chest. It was the sound of a king who had just found his most priceless treasure. "What they called a taint," he vowed, his voice a promise that sealed my fate, is a power that will bring this kingdom to its knees in worship, and it belongs to me. The days bled into a quiet rhythm. The terror in my bones receded, replaced by a thrum of purpose. The ancient codex was not a book. It was a conversation, and I was the first person to speak its language in 1,000 years. I spent hours at the lectern, my fingers tracing the glowing script, the scent of old parchment and ozone clinging to me like a second skin. He would watch, sometimes from the shadows of the hearth, a silent, monolithic guardian. One evening I didn't wait for him to approach. I turned from the book, my eyes bright with discovery, and called his name. Garrick. The name felt strange on my tongue, but powerful. It's not just a prophecy. It's a map. He was at my side in 2 silent strides, his presence a wall of warmth and cedar. I pointed to a complex spiral of runes. Everyone thought this described the coming of a plague, a devouring darkness, but they read it wrong. It's not a plague. It's a battle formation, a pincer movement from the northern clans, hidden within a poem. His amber eyes narrowed, scanning the text he could not see, then looking at me with an intensity that stole my breath. My war council has stared at that page for a century. They saw a curse to be feared. They were looking for a reason to be afraid, I replied, my voice steady for the first time in my life. I was looking for an answer. Your kingdom's weakness isn't the northern border. It's here. I tapped a seemingly insignificant line of text. A forgotten river passage. It's a backdoor right into your citadel. Later, as I walked through the stone halls, a low, pained growl echoed from the training grounds. Haiti, his spectral wolf of fury, was pacing, a storm of shadow and rage. The guards kept their distance, their hands on their swords. They saw a monster to be contained. I saw something in agony. Ignoring their shocked warnings, I walked onto the grounds. The giant wolf stopped, its ethereal eyes burning into me. It snarled, a sound that could curdle blood, but I didn't flinch. I felt its pain as if it were my own, a sharp, piercing sting. "You're hurt," I whispered, my moon shadow aura instinctively reaching out not to command but to soothe. The great beast lowered its head. I saw it then, a splinter of obsidian, not of this world, lodged in its spectral paw, radiating malice. A curse shard. Reaching out, my fingers phased through its smoky form, closing around the shard. It felt like holding ice and fire. With a sharp tug, I pulled it free. The shard dissolved into dust, and the great wolf sighed, the tension leaving its form as it nudged my hand with its massive head. From the ramparts above, Garrick watched the entire exchange. He had seen me as a key, a treasure, a weapon. But now, watching me calm the physical manifestation of his own primal rage with nothing but empathy, he saw something more. He saw the other half of his soul. That night, he came to my chambers. He didn't speak of prophecies or war. He stopped before me, his gaze softer than I had ever seen it. They threw you away because they could not control you. They feared the very thing that makes you, you. He reached out, his calloused thumb gently brushing my cheek. What they saw as a flaw is the most powerful magic I have ever known. It is the heart of a true queen. The peace shattered with the sound of a war horn at the main gate, a frantic, dissonant blast that echoed through the stone halls. It wasn't a call to arms, it was a demand for entry. A guard, breathless and pale, burst into the library where I stood with Garrick. "My king," he stammered. "Alpha Marcus Thorn of Silverwood is here. He demands an audience." My blood ran cold. The name was a ghost, a curse, and beside him, the guard added, was Liam. They were waiting in the great hall, posturing before the cold hearth. My father, Marcus, stood ramrod straight, his face a mask of righteous fury, his eyes scanning the hall as if judging its worth. Liam stood slightly behind him, trying to look noble and concerned. But I could see the familiar weakness in his eyes, the same cowardice that had let him abandon me years ago. Seeing them here, in this sanctuary, felt like a violation. It felt like filth being tracked across a pristine floor. Garrick entered the hall with me a step behind him, his body a living shield. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping 10 degrees. My father's arrogant expression faltered for a second as Garrick's sheer presence washed over him. He was a lord in his own lands, but here he was nothing more than a stray wolf howling at a mountain. "King Garrick," Marcus boomed, recovering his bravado, "I have come for what is mine. You are harboring a dangerous anomaly, a curse that my pack rightfully cast out. Release my daughter to my custody so she can be properly contained before her taint spreads." His words were stones thrown at my new, fragile peace, intended to shatter it. Liam then took a foolish step forward, his hand outstretched towards me. "Ilara," he pleaded, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We were worried. We've come to rescue you from this beast. You don't know what he is. Come home." Home. The word was acid on my tongue. He spoke as if I were a lost pet, not a woman he had helped condemn. For a moment, the old fear gripped me, the instinct to hide, to make myself small, to accept the blame. My hands trembled. I could feel the guards watching, could feel my father's judgmental glare, could feel Liam's pathetic attempt at heroism. The old shame washed over me, a cold and familiar tide. But then I felt the heat radiating from Garrick's back, a steady, grounding warmth. I felt the memory of his spectral wolves bowing to me, the weight of his trust, the sound of him calling me queen. The tide of shame met a wall of unshakable strength, and for the first time in my life, it receded. A spark of fury ignited in its place. He had no right. They had no right. This was my home now, and they were the trespassers. A cold, dangerous amusement flickered in Garrick's eyes. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at Liam. He addressed the entire hall, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in everyone's bones. "You hear this noise?" he asked, a humorless smirk twisting his lips. "An alpha who threw away a diamond now crying because he sees it in a crown. You have no authority here, Thorn. You gave up that right when you chose fear over blood." He finally turned his gaze on my father, and the sheer predatory force of it made the older alpha take an involuntary step back. "And that is not your daughter. That is my queen." "You speak of a taint," Garrick continued, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper that carried more weight than any shout. "The only sickness in this hall is your pathetic ignorance." He gestured to me, a silent command. The scroll. My fear was gone, burned away by a cold, righteous fury. My hands were perfectly steady as I retrieved the ancient text. In the stunned silence, my voice rang out, clear and strong, as I read the prophecy of the Moonshadow Queen, the savior destined to unite the kingdoms, the one whose power could soothe the primal rage, the one they had cast out. When I finished speaking, Hati and Skull materialized at my sides, not as faint specters, but as solid manifestations of shadow and smoke. The two colossal wolves, beings that had terrified alphas for centuries, lowered their massive heads to me in absolute submission. A wave of shock and awe swept through the room. Garrick moved then, striding past my father as if he were a piece of furniture, his eyes locked on mine. "You banished the woman the moon goddess sent to save us," he declared to the room, his voice a vow of iron. "You exiled your salvation." He stopped before me, his expression softening into something no one else had ever seen. He cupped my face, his calloused thumbs a gentle anchor in a world that had just tilted on its axis. Then, in front of every alpha, Every guard and the two men who had tried to destroy me, he leaned in and sank his teeth into the crook of my neck. It wasn't a bite of violence. It was a mark of ownership, of destiny. A brilliant silver light erupted from us, the mating bond snapping into place with the force of a thunderclap. Power, pure and absolute, flooded my veins. He pulled back, his eyes glowing with primal light. "She is not yours to claim," he roared, the sound shaking the very stones of his fortress. "She is mine now." I lifted my chin, the trembling girl I once was, now a ghost. I met my father's horrified gaze, not with fear, but with the cold, unshakable authority of the queen he had just declared me to be. His face was a mask of utter ruin. Liam looked like he had been physically struck, his pathetic attempt at heroism crumbling into dust. They had come to reclaim a broken thing, a shadow they could lock away. Instead, they found themselves kneeling before a power they couldn't comprehend, their futures turning to ash at their feet. They were nothing, and in the protective circle of my king's arms, I was finally everything. Our wedding was not a political merger. It was an anointing. I walked the aisle not as a bride being given away, but as a queen returning to her throne. The silver crown Garrick placed on my head was cool and heavy, a stark contrast to the burning, possessive heat of his hand at the small of my back. He didn't just vow to love me, he swore fealty to the magic in my blood, the very moon shadow they had once called a curse. The assembled alphas, once so quick to judge, now knelt, not in fear of his power, but in awe of ours. Years passed like a peaceful river. Our reign became a legend. Where Garrick's strength provided the kingdom's shield, my empathy became its heart. Disputes between ancient warring packs were not settled with bloodshed in a dueling ring, but with quiet understanding in my solar. I could feel their rage, their grief, their pride, and I could soothe it, untangling knots of hatred that had persisted for generations. We built an era of prosperity, not on the foundation of dominance, but on the radical idea of worthiness. Even now, after all this time, he would find me in the library, the place of my greatest shame, now my greatest comfort. He would come up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder as I read. He never tired of the scent of old parchment and moonlight that clung to me. "My wise queen," he would rumble, his voice a balm to a soul that had once known only silence. In his arms, I was not just a ruler or a mate. I was cherished, a treasure he had plucked from the dust and polished until I shone brighter than any star. Our legacy was sealed not in scrolls or treaties, but in the laughter that echoed from the courtyard below. 2 children, a boy with his father's amber eyes and a girl with my silver-tinged hair, played with a spectral wolf pup that flickered between shadow and smoke. They were born of love, not of obligation, a symbol of a new age where power and compassion were 2 sides of the same coin. Watching them, I felt the last of my old wounds finally heal, replaced by a fierce, protective love that was its own kind of magic. The downfall of the Silverwood Pack was not swift and bloody. It was a slow, agonizing decay. After the humiliation in Garrick's hall, their faith in my father shattered. They saw him not as a strong leader protecting his people, but as a blind fool who had thrown away a goddess-given gift out of fear and pride. Families began to leave one by one, seeking asylum with packs led by alphas who had witnessed my ascension. The once proud pack withered, its name becoming synonymous with ignorance. My father, Marcus Thorne, did not die a warrior's death. He died alone. He became an alpha with no pack, a king with no subjects. Stripped of his title and his lands, he wandered the edges of the territories, a lone wolf haunted by the ghost of the daughter he had disowned. Other packs would see him from a distance, a pathetic, ragged figure, and turn away in disgust. His greatest fear was irrelevance, and in the end, that was the precise nature of his prison. He was simply forgotten. Liam's fate was, in many ways, crueler. He was not exiled. He was forced to remain, a living monument to cowardice. His betrothal was broken, his ambitions turned to ash. No pack would ever trust him with the position of power. He lived out his days as a low-ranking sentinel, forever watching the borders of a kingdom ruled by the woman he had so easily discarded. His name became a cautionary tale whispered to young wolves, a warning against choosing ambition over honor, against turning your back on the one person you are meant to protect. Standing on the high balcony of the citadel, Garrick's arm, a familiar, solid weight around me, I watched our children chase fireflies in the twilight. The kingdom below was peaceful, bathed in the soft light of the rising moon. The air was clean, the future bright. All the pain, all the rejection had led me here, to him, to this. It was the ultimate truth of my existence, the final line in my story. What blind tradition cast out as a shadow, fate revealed to be the light that would guide a king.